Hello, and welcome to the class on human and legal rights and advocacy. We're very excited to have you with us today, and even more excited that you have joined our team at BSDC. So, welcome. Um, we're going to go ahead and start our class. But before we do, my name is Tammy Weichel, and I work for the compliance team here at BSDC. And I'm also the chairperson for the Human and Legal Rights Committee, which we're going to talk a little bit more about here momentarily. So, welcome, and we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen and have you follow along with that. All right. So as I stated, this class is on human and legal rights and advocacy or advocating for individuals. We're going to talk about advocating for the individuals that we support here at BSDC. If you're an advocate, you're someone who defends, supports, or promotes the interests of another person, a group, or maybe even a cause. Effective advocacy requires being vested in creating a better life for the individuals that we support here at BSDC. It also includes assuring individuals maintain their individual rights. We do that through talking with staff members, QDDPs, which stands for Qualified Developmental Disability Professional, the interdisciplinary team, managers, and of course, the administration. So, who are advocates? Well, all of us are employees, guardians, family members, members of the person's team, the administration, frontline staff, friends, human and legal rights committee members, and so forth. Everyone that interacts with the individuals at BSDC should be advocating for them. So, what would you do in some situations to help advocate for an individual? Scenario one is about an individual who's diabetic that has some money and wants to use it in the vending machine for a break. Staff want to advocate for healthy choices, but they also know that it may cause the individual to become upset because it normally does. Another staff walks by and says, "Oh, just let them have whatever they want." What would be a good way to advocate for the individual? You might try talking to the individual about good, healthy choices that are available in the vending machine. We might talk about options that they could choose instead of a regular soda, maybe choosing a diet soda with less sugar because of their diabetes. If the individual is very insistent that they want a regular pop or a candy bar, for example, maybe we talk to the individual about eating or drinking half of their snack now and saving the other half for later. There are things that we can do to advocate for the individual's health, but also trying to respect their wishes. Scenario number two, you're sitting at a team meeting, which is an interdisciplinary team, and the individual you're supporting is trying to express something to the team. However, the team can't quite figure out what they're trying to say, but you know the person very well and you know what they are saying. What the individual is trying to express and what the team is talking about doing contradict one another. What could you do to advocate for the individual in that situation? We certainly want you to speak up and say, "I think what Tammy is trying to say is that She doesn't want to go to bed that early at night. She would rather stay up a little later and get up a little later in the morning, something to that effect. Then you could ask the individual, Tammy, that you're supporting, if what you shared was what they were trying to express. We want you to speak up on behalf of the individual when it's appropriate to do so. The last scenario indicates that you're at a restaurant and the waiter looks to you to order for the individual you're with. What might be a good way to advocate for that individual to be independent? You could simply look at the individual and say, would you please tell the waiter what you would like to order for supper? Something like that. So we're going to talk about rights now a little bit. What are human rights that all people have? There are very many rights, but some of them include freedom of choice, freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom of privacy, freedom of access, freedom to receive medical treatment, freedom of religion, freedom of employment, and freedom of the use of their money. We all have these freedoms, and the individuals that live at BSTC are no different. They also have these rights and freedoms. Sometimes individuals' rights need to be restricted. But why would we do that? Well, it could be for safety, to protect someone from hurting themselves, protect them from hurting someone else. Safety with weapons or sharp objects that they may not understand can be dangerous. Or perhaps they use sharp objects in a dangerous way to hurt themselves or others. Leaving an area without permission or telling anyone where they're going. Obeying laws. Individuals may not realize that they can't just take something from the store, but they have to pay for it. And other safety concerns, such as deteriorating skills. When someone gets older, perhaps their skills with walking or keeping their balance worsen. We may limit freedoms for health reasons. We may also limit rights or freedoms when trying to support an individual to learn new skills. Restrictions are always used as a last resort. When considering the implementation of a restriction, we have to consider whether the issue is important enough to change and how many times has it occurred. If somebody is falling a lot, have they fallen once or have they fallen 5 times in the last month? What can we try before we restrict someone? Have we tried other options and ideas first? What is the risk of putting a restriction in place versus the risk of not putting a restriction in place? For example, if someone is falling while walking, is it safer to allow them to continue to walk? Or is it safer to put them in a wheelchair to ensure they don't fall, knowing that their ability to ambulate will be greatly decreased? What type of training can we put in place to help teach the person? Now, how do we know when we can reduce or remove the restriction? All restrictions have to have a reduction plan so that hopefully someday that restriction can be removed. What needs to happen in order for a restriction to be implemented? An interdisciplinary team needs to meet and come up with a recommendation of a restriction. Then the guardian needs to approve of the restriction. Emergency approvals can be given through Human and Legal Rights Committee chairperson, but then the committee will always go back and approve the restriction fully through the committee. Human and Legal Rights Committee approval is necessary prior to implementing the restriction unless an emergency approval has been given. Individuals all have the right to due process, which is the purpose of Human and Legal Rights Committee. Due process is meant to ensure fundamental rights of individuals have not been violated. When safety is at risk, an emergency approval should be obtained. Protection from harm and safety always come first, even when the action provided for safety is restrictive. If there is an emergency and a restriction needs to be put in place immediately, staff will contact the shift supervisor. The shift supervisor will then call the QDDP if it is during the week. The QDDP will schedule a time for the team to meet, will ensure the guardian has been notified and approves, and then last, will notify the Human and Legal Rights chairperson. If it happens to be a weekend or a holiday where an emergency restriction is needed, the shift supervisor will call the AOC for approval, which is the administrator on call. The shift supervisor will then call the guardian and get a verbal consent and then email the QDDP. Human and Legal Rights Committee meets twice a month. Per regulations, there are certain people that have to be in attendance at Human and Legal Rights Committee meetings. And those people include a parent of an individual that resides at BSTC, a legal guardian of an individual that resides at BSTC, someone that lives at BSTC, a member of the behavior support team, a community member, a staff member, and the HLRC chairperson. This group approves or denies restrictions based on information given by the team. Sometimes staff will accidentally restrict an individual's rights. When that happens, it's called an infringement of rights. An infringement of rights is a violation of someone's rights, stepping over boundaries that should be respected. Usually this occurs on accident. An example of an infringement of rights would be if someone was unable to unlock their wheelchair brakes because they couldn't reach them, didn't have the arm strength to unlock them, things of that nature. And a staff member locked the wheelchair brakes when someone was just sitting in the living room. That would be an infringement of rights. Although the staff might believe that that's the safest thing to do, that is a restriction that also needs to be approved. So typically, we would not lock wheelchair brakes unless it is approved, or perhaps you're transferring someone from a wheelchair to another seated position. Infringement of rights usually, as I said, is accidentally done. And that's okay. We all make mistakes and we'll learn from them. However, when someone's rights have been infringed, we're going to notify the QDDP, who will in turn contact the team, the guardian, and the human and legal rights chairperson. Sometimes words or actions can also be restricted. The first scenario, supper is about done, and an individual is moving slowly with cleaning up the kitchen. The activity for the evening is go to a movie. Staff states to the individual, you can't go to the movie until you clean the kitchen. Although this is intended to motivate the individual, it would be a restriction to not allow them to go to the movie until the kitchen is clean. What would be a better way to approach this situation so that we're not restricting an individual's rights to go to a movie? You might encourage the individual to clean up a little quicker so that they don't miss the beginning of the movie. You might offer to help the individual clean up the kitchen so that you can get done faster and they won't miss the beginning of the movie. Something along those lines where it's more in an encouraging tone than a you can't go type of situation. In the second scenario, it's time for an individual to take their medication. The individual needing the medication is playing a game on a computer. The individual says, I'll take it in 5 minutes. I'll take my medicine in 5 minutes. How would staff react to this request without infringing on someone's rights? Staff person might say, okay, I'm going to set a timer. And when the timer goes off, it has been 5 minutes. And then I would like for you to take your medicine. The individual or the staff person, pardon me, might say, that's fine. I'll come back in 5 minutes. Staff or person might also say, after 5 minutes, it will be time to take your medicine. So, I hope that you're cooperative in 5 minutes. Something to that effect. What we wouldn't want to say is, no, you have to get off the computer right now and take your medicine. That would be an infringement on their rights. Scenario number 3, an individual is upset and sits on the floor near the front door. Staff prompt her to get up, but the person refuses. Staff member knows that another group of individuals are coming home and are going to be walking through the door. What should the staff do? Should the staff say, you have to get up because people are coming home? Well, they don't have to get up, although it would be a good idea, right? What the staff could do as a better option would be to just talk to the individual and say, if you get up, you won't get hit by the door when your housemates come home. It's also sometimes helpful to think outside the box. And if an individual is refusing to be cooperative or refusing to get up off the floor in this particular situation, the staff member might radio their coworker and ask them if they could come in a side door and then just avoid the whole situation. At any rate, we want to make sure we're not demanding individuals do something, as that would be a restriction of their rights. All rights restrictions are documented on the individual safety plan. So if you're not sure what restrictions are in place, always refer to their safety plan. Also, when talking with individuals, try not to restrict them unless it is approved. We do not want to restrict them unless it's approved. So instead of saying, go to your room, you might say, how about if we go to a quiet space so you can calm down a little bit? Or instead of saying, you cannot have the pop, you might say, what other choices look good in the vending machine that won't affect your diabetes or your blood sugar? We kind of talked about that situation earlier. A mental health behavioral crisis intervention plan, or an MHBCIP. Most of the time, this is just called a behavior crisis intervention plan. That also may include some restrictions. And those restrictions could be things like an elopement protocol, a homicide or suicide precaution, physical restraint, or a mechanical restraint, all of which would be restrictions. So if you're unsure if somebody has those types of restrictions, you would want to look in their mental health behavior crisis intervention plan. Also, when you're documenting issues that have happened in T-logs, make sure you use as many facts as possible. What was happening before the incident? Who was present? What did the environment look like? Any verbal interactions? And make sure you're using non-restrictive language in T-logs. So we want to encourage the person to do something, or we want to ask the person to do something. We do not want to use restrictive language, which would be things like, I locked something up. I allowed the individual to do it. I took something away, or I removed something from the individual, or I told the individual they cannot do something, or they cannot have something, or I told the individual to go to their room. We want to use encouraging language with individuals and when we're documenting. Individuals have the right to file a complaint or a grievance if they feel that a restriction is not appropriate. Staff, staff members, guardians, or QDDPs may have to help the individual file their complaint. When that happens, this is always resolved at the lowest level possible. The QDDP or an administrator can provide the form when it's needed. Just have to ask them for it. And then the Human and Legal Rights Committee has 15 working days to resolve the issue and provide the resolution in writing. The Human and Legal Rights Committee chairperson does training with the individuals about quarterly. And this is to help the individuals and staff learn about their rights and responsibilities and promote the individual's rights. We also talk about advocating during these teaching sessions. The quarterly meetings for with the individuals to talk about their rights usually consist of some type of game or video, movie, something to make it a little bit more fun for the individuals. And then employee training. We have training through staff development for all new employees, where we go over rights and responsibilities of employees, how to advocate for individuals, how Human and Legal Rights Committee works, and the process to implement restrictions. Thank you for your attention during this presentation. We hope that you enjoy your employment here at BSDC, and I look forward to meeting each of you. Thank you.